My girlfriend cheated on me with my best friend. Now, 6 years later, right before my wedding, one shocking revelation turned my world upside down. I was 28 years old when everything fell apart between me, my ex-girlfriend Emily, and my old buddy Jake. Emily and I had been dating for a while. It wasn't perfect, but I had no reason to suspect anything was off, at least not right under my nose. When I think back, there were probably a few red flags. Like how she'd laugh a little too much at Jake's silly jokes, or how she spent a lot of time in his room watching movies on his big TV. But I convinced myself it was nothing. I trusted both of them. Boy, was I wrong. One evening after work, I came home to find both of them acting weird. They were being too nice, like they were overcompensating or trying too hard to act like everything was fine. Emily offered to make dinner, which she never did, and Jake suddenly suggested we grab a burger together. It felt off. But I didn't think too much about it. I was exhausted, and maybe I was just imagining things. So I brushed it off and went with the flow. But everything came crashing down one night in the worst possible way. I was deep asleep when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Ryan, a mutual friend of ours. It was like 3:15 a.m. He'd sent me a screenshot of a conversation where Emily was talking to one of her friends, admitting she'd been sleeping with Jake for months. My heart dropped. I couldn't believe it. But I knew Ryan wasn't the kind of guy to joke about something like that. He didn't say much, just, "Dude, I thought you should know." And that was it. I stared at my phone, completely numb. My hands were shaking. It felt like the last few years, the good times with Emily, the late-night hangouts with Jake, were all a lie. This was the woman I had planned to marry. Jake was the guy I let stay with us while he was down on his luck. I felt like the biggest fool. After a few minutes of disbelief, I knew I had to confront them. I stormed out of my room and marched straight to Jake's door. I didn't even knock, just flung it open. There they were, sitting on his bed, looking like two kids caught stealing cookies from the jar. The guilt on their faces told me everything I needed to know. Emily started mumbling something about how she wanted to tell me. How it just happened. Just happened? Like I was supposed to buy that. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. There was yelling. Honestly, I don't even remember everything I said. I was livid. Jake tried to play it cool, saying it wasn't that big of a deal because Emily and I were already having problems. Emily just sat there, looking like she might cry. But honestly, I didn't care. She had months to talk to me if she was unhappy. She had time to end things instead of sneaking around behind my back. Once things calmed down, well, as much as they could, I told them both to leave. I didn't care where they went. I just wanted them out of my sight. Jake tried to explain himself, saying he never meant for it to go this far. Like that somehow made it better. Emily kept saying she never wanted things to end like this. But it was all just excuses, things they thought might make me feel better. Nothing they said could change what had already happened. I ended up crashing on a friend's couch that night. I needed to be anywhere but that apartment. The next morning, with no sleep at all, I decided it was time to move on for good. I went back to the apartment to get my things, and of course, they were both still there. Emily tried to stop me, saying she didn't want to lose me as a friend, which was ridiculous. Real friends don't do what she did. I packed up my stuff as quickly as I could, tossing everything into bags and boxes. I didn't care about neatness. I just wanted out. Jake stood there in the corner, avoiding my gaze like the coward he was. Finally, when I was done, I told them both I wanted nothing to do with them ever again. Emily looked like she wanted to say something, but I didn't stick around to hear it. I just walked out and never looked back. From that moment, I was done with them. Done with everything. I didn't tell our friends what happened, thinking they'd figure it out eventually. But here's the kicker, they didn't care. A few of them reached out, apologizing for the drama. But when it came down to it, they chose to stay friends with Emily and Jake. I didn't know whether to laugh or be angry, but it only made me more certain about what I needed to do. I cut them all off. Every last one. I moved back to my home state, changed my phone number, deleted all my social media, and disappeared from that entire friend group. At first, it was painful, like I was walking away from everything I knew. But deep down, I knew it was the only way forward. I couldn't heal if I kept holding on to people who weren't there for me when I needed them most. So I let go of all of it and never looked back. It was tough, especially in the beginning. There were days when I questioned whether I'd been too hard on them, or if I was just letting my anger take control. But every time I thought about reaching out, I'd remember that night. The look in their eyes, like I was the intruder. Like I was the one ruining some perfect little love story they had going in their heads. But I wasn't the one sneaking around. I wasn't the one lying to people's faces. The days after were tough. I had to rebuild my life from scratch, figuring things out on my own. Slowly, though, I found new friends. I got my career on track. Bit by bit, I started to build a life I could be proud of. And then, I met Haley. She was everything Emily never was: honest, loyal, and respectful of the people in her life. She knew my past and didn't flinch. She respected that I'd moved on and never tried to dig through the wreckage. With Haley, I finally felt like I could breathe again. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly happy. So there I was, engaged to the woman of my dreams, miles away from the chaos I'd left behind. That chapter? I thought it was closed for good. But I was wrong. Emily and Jake weren't done with me yet. So, here I am, thinking my life is finally on track, right? I'd cut ties with Emily and Jake, moved on with Haley, and was focused on the future. I thought I'd left all that drama behind. But of course, it wasn't that simple. It all started with one innocent post. I'm not big on social media, but I wanted to share a little happiness. Just a picture of me and Haley, a sweet caption about our engagement. Nothing fancy. I figured a few family members and old friends might like it. But that post? It turned out to be the thing that dragged all the old mess right back into my life. A couple of days later, I got a random message. I looked at my phone, and there it was. A message from Emily. My heart sank. After all these years of silence, she suddenly decided to reach out. I stared at her name, and all those old emotions came flooding back: anger, betrayal, disbelief. I almost deleted it without reading. But then I paused. Why now? Why after all this time? Still, I didn't need closure. I wasn't curious. I wasn't interested in apologies or her side of the story. I had moved on. I wasn't going backward. So, I blocked her. Didn't open the message. Just blocked her. Problem solved, right? Or so I thought. That night, I told Haley about it. I wanted to be transparent. It felt like a weird blast from the past, and I didn't want any secrets between us. Haley just laughed and said I'd done the right thing. To be safe, she blocked Emily too. We figured that was it. But nope. The fake profiles started showing up. At first, I didn't notice. I'm not that active online. But Haley started getting friend requests from random accounts. No posts. Generic photos. Totally fake. She's sharp though. She didn't accept any of them. After a few, she started getting suspicious. Do you think it's Emily? She asked. I couldn't argue with her. Who else would go to all that trouble? It was childish. We were grown adults, and Emily was acting like we were back in high school. Eventually, I decided to just delete my social media altogether. Why keep it if she was using it to mess with me? Before deleting, though, I sent one final message. From one of the fake accounts she'd clearly made. I told her to leave me alone. That I wanted no part of whatever she was trying to stir up. I didn't wait for a reply. Just hit send, blocked the account, and deleted everything. Done, right? She'd get the message. But no, not even close. A few days later, my sister Lauren called. Now, Lauren and I are close, but we don't talk every day. So when I saw her name on my screen, I figured it was something casual, maybe wedding stuff. But her voice was serious. She didn't even say hi. Just blurted out, I need to talk to you about something weird. Naturally, I was like, what now? She said Emily had reached out to her. And it wasn't a casual message. Emily had launched into this wild story. Claiming I had a son. Yeah, you heard that right. A son. At first, I laughed. I thought it was a joke. Just another stunt to get attention. But Lauren wasn't laughing. She said Emily sounded dead serious. Desperate, even. Lauren had tried to ignore her, but Emily kept pushing. She sent pictures of a kid. Claimed he looked just like me. Said she'd never wanted to keep it a secret. I wasn't buying it for a second. To me, this was a last-ditch effort. If the kid was really mine, why hadn't she said anything years ago? Why not tell me when she was pregnant? Or when the kid was born? Why not ask for help or child support? It didn't add up. At all. I told Lauren exactly that. 3. Lauren said Emily was pretty persistent, and I could tell she wasn't sure what to make of it either. That made the whole thing feel even more bizarre. It really messed with my head. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just another one of Emily's manipulative games. But a small part of me couldn't help but wonder. What if she was telling the truth? What if she really did have a son, my son? The timing felt way too convenient. And though I wasn't eager to believe anything Emily said, the idea of a child being out there, possibly mine, wasn't something I could easily dismiss. For days, I couldn't focus. I'd be at work, and my mind would drift back to Emily and this supposed kid. Haley noticed something was off. She kept asking if I was okay, but I didn't want to drag her into the mess. So I told her it was just work stress. But in reality, my mind was all over the place. The idea of having a son, my son, out there, without me even knowing. It was eating away at me. Finally, I realized I couldn't just ignore it anymore. I had to put this to rest, one way or another. I didn't want Emily showing up at our door or causing more chaos. So I decided to take action. I called a lawyer. I didn't want to handle it directly, no drama, no contact. I figured a lawyer could send an official letter, something formal to make it clear. I wanted her out of my life. I explained everything, the messages, the fake profiles, and, of course, that I have a son message. He listened carefully, then said he'd take care of it. He'd send her a letter requesting proof. If the story was real, she'd have to show it. If not, she needed to leave me alone, permanently. Honestly, it was a relief to hand it over. I didn't want to talk to Emily ever again. Letting the lawyer deal with her felt like finally setting a boundary I could breathe behind. I thought this would be it. I felt lighter, finally free of Emily's nonsense. I assumed she'd get the letter, realize I wasn't playing games, and disappear. But just a few days later, the lawyer called. He said we needed to meet in person. I thought, great, maybe Emily backed off. I walked into his office feeling hopeful, maybe even relaxed. He sat me down, quiet at first, then handed me an envelope. Inside were several pictures of a little boy, and I can't even explain it. The kid looked just like me. It was eerie, like staring at an old photo of myself. Same dark hair, same eyes, even the same crooked little smile. I just sat there, frozen, staring at the photos. A storm of anger and confusion hit all at once. My lawyer explained that Emily had sent those pictures along with a note about the timeline. According to her, she'd gotten pregnant right after I found out about her and Jake. But they thought the baby was Jake's. So they moved on with their lives, convinced of that. Years later, when they tried to have more children, they found out Jake couldn't have kids. That's when doubts started creeping in. I'll be honest, part of me still thought it was a setup. Emily was never trustworthy, and the timing? Way too convenient. But those photos, they were hard to ignore. Still, I wasn't going to take her word for it. I told my lawyer to arrange a DNA test. I needed solid proof before I could even start to process any of it. Waiting for the results was torture. Every day felt like a week. Eventually, I told Haley what was going on. I didn't want to keep her in the dark. She was supportive, calm, kind, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Because if this child was mine, everything would change. But she stuck by me. She reassured me that no matter what, we'd face it together. And then, finally, the results came in. The lawyer called and said, "It's a match." I didn't know how to feel. Shock, anger, grief, relief, all of it, all at once. I had a son, a 6-year-old son I'd never known about. A son who'd been raised thinking Jake was his father. A boy who had no idea I even existed. It's one thing to find out you're a dad. It's another to realize you missed the first 6 years of your child's life because someone kept it from you. I couldn't think straight. How do you even begin to process something like that? I thought about the boy, about everything I'd missed. His first words, his first steps, birthdays, bedtime stories. And then my thoughts shifted to Jake. How had he lived with this? Raising my child, all while knowing deep down he might not be the father? And Emily? She had 6 years to come clean. 6 years to give me even a chance to be there. But she chose to hide it. Now, suddenly, she was reaching out? Why? Because my life looked good now? It was hard not to feel like this wasn't about me, or even the kid. It felt like she'd seen a window and decided to jump through it. Not out of guilt. Not out of responsibility. But because it was convenient. For that realization hit me like a punch to the gut. And it only made my anger burn hotter. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the truth. I had a son now. Someone who didn't ask for any of this. He was innocent. No matter what his mother and Jake had done, I wasn't going to walk away from him. I told my lawyer to reach out to Emily and Jake. I made it clear I was going to be part of my son's life. I wasn't going to sit on the sidelines anymore. I wanted visitation rights, and I was more than willing to pay child support. But I wouldn't let them dictate the terms, not after keeping the truth from me for 6 years. As soon as visitation was mentioned, Jake lost it. According to my lawyer, he said he was the real dad and didn't want me anywhere near his son. I couldn't believe it. This guy slept with my girlfriend, raised my son without telling me, and now wanted to pretend I didn't exist? I was furious. I told my lawyer to let him know. If I was paying child support, I wasn't just some guy mailing checks. I was going to be in my son's life, whether Jake liked it or not. Then Emily tried stepping in, offering some kind of compromise. She suggested I could visit, but it would be discreet, so the kid wouldn't get confused. Yeah, that wasn't going to work for me. If they wanted my money, they'd have to accept that I'd be involved. Fully. And if they refused, I'd set up a savings account for my son and let him access it when he turned 21. I wasn't about to play along with their twisted version of family. The whole thing felt like a nightmare. Here I was, ready to step up as a father, and all I got was pushback. They wanted my money, but not me. It felt like I was being treated like an ATM. Summoned when it was convenient, shut out when it wasn't. So, I doubled down. I told my lawyer. If I was contributing financially, I wanted full visitation rights, or at the very least, everything I was legally entitled to as his biological father. I wasn't going to be shut out of my own kid's life. If they didn't agree, they wouldn't get a cent. I'd rather save it for my son's future than let them control the narrative. Emily and Jake didn't take that well. They tried to make me feel guilty, called me selfish, accused me of trying to ruin their family. But seriously? They were the ones who hid my son from me. Selfish? They were the selfish ones, pretending to be some perfect little family while keeping the truth from me. So here I was, prepared to fight for my son. And I wasn't backing down. I had no idea how it would all play out. But one thing was clear. I wasn't letting them keep him from me any longer. I told my lawyer I was in it for the long haul. And we started figuring out the next steps. Legally, it wasn't as straightforward as I'd hoped. Emily and Jake had a head start. Jake was listed as the father on the birth certificate. My lawyer explained that even though I was the biological dad, getting full rights wouldn't be easy. It would take time, money, and patience. And honestly, I didn't have much of any of those. Emily and Jake weren't making it any easier. My lawyer tried arranging a meeting to talk visitation. Jake refused to show. Instead, he sent a long, self-righteous email saying he was the only dad my son had ever known, and that he didn't want me disrupting his life. Disrupting? Like my son was a project he was managing, and I was just getting in the way. Meanwhile, Emily kept trying to play mediator. She suggested I could see my son, but only occasionally. Maybe every few months. Preferably when Jake wasn't around. She wanted to keep it quiet. Said she didn't want to confuse the boy about who his dad was. But I wasn't having it. I was his dad. Biologically. Morally. Emotionally, whether he knew it yet or not. And I wasn't going to accept a background role. I told my lawyer. Their terms were unacceptable. Either they let me in as his father, or I wasn't giving them a dime. They couldn't have it both ways. Emily started sending guilt trip emails. Told me I was hurting my son by not helping financially. Jake took the territorial route. Claimed I was only showing up because I didn't want my past to haunt me. Mistakes? My son wasn't a mistake. The real mistake was trusting either of them in the first place. The back and forth dragged on for weeks. Emily and Jake kept pushing. Emails, pressure, manipulative guilt. But every time I felt worn down, I thought of my son. He didn't know me yet, but someday he would. And when that day came, I wanted him to know the truth. That I fought to be in his life. That I didn't walk away. That I didn't just let someone else play dad while I stood on the sidelines. Finally, after what felt like forever, we got them to agree to meet in person. 5. The whole thing was uncomfortable. Emily walked in first, looking like she was about to give a presentation or walk into a tough interview. A few minutes later, Jake came in. He didn't even look at me, just sat down, arms crossed, clearly pissed to be there. The atmosphere was thick. The air felt heavy. Emily started talking first. She explained that she'd kept the truth from me because she thought it was better for our son. Better? I asked, trying not to raise my voice. How was keeping him from his father for 6 years in his best interest? She stumbled through her answer. Said she thought Jake was the father and didn't want to complicate things by involving me. Then Jake jumped in, and he was in full defense mode. I raised him. I've been there for everything, teaching him to ride a bike, helping with school projects, all the scraped knees, he said, like I was just some outsider trying to barge in. And sure, I get it, he had been there. But that didn't change the fact that I was his biological father. I had the right to be a part of his life, too. We went back and forth for hours. They kept circling back to what was best for our son. But let's be honest, what they really meant was what was easiest for them. They didn't want me involved. They wanted me to be a bank, a source of money with zero presence. They kept tossing out phrases like, "We don't want to confuse him." But the kid's 6 years old. How long did they think they could keep this up? At some point, he'd start asking questions. Finally, my lawyer stepped in and laid it out. If they wanted financial support, I was getting regular visitation. Simple. Jake looked like he was about to explode, but I didn't budge. At this point, it wasn't about them. It was about my son, about my right to be in his life. Emily tried one last pitch. She suggested we could revisit the conversation in a year or two. Said maybe it would be easier once our son was more adjusted. But I wasn't compromising anymore. I told them, if I didn't get proper visitation, I'd set up a savings account for my son and leave it at that. That money would be his when he turned 21. And he'd know that his father didn't walk away, that I fought to be in his life. When I said that, I saw the shock on Emily's face. She didn't expect me to stand so firm. Maybe she thought I'd just pay up to avoid hassle. But that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't going to stay a shadow in my son's life just because it was convenient for them. I wanted him to know me, to understand I was there, that I cared enough to fight for him. The meeting ended with no resolution. And honestly, it was frustrating. But I walked out feeling like I'd made my position clear. They knew I wasn't fading into the background. If they wanted financial help, they'd have to accept my role as a father. As I walked out of that room, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. Anger for everything they'd put me through. Sadness because, in a twisted way, Jake was right. He had been there during those 6 years I wasn't. And nothing I did could change that. But that didn't mean I was giving up. I was going to be in my son's life. No matter what. Leaving that meeting, I felt drained, but determined. It was obvious by then. Emily and Jake were going to make this as difficult as possible. But I wasn't walking away. The stakes were too high, and I wasn't going to let them decide how involved I could be. Still, the frustration was eating at me. It felt like every time I made progress, they blocked me. A few quiet weeks passed. My lawyer and I kept working on formal visitation rights, and I was ready to go to court if that's what it came to. I wasn't worried about the hassle anymore. I just wanted to be in my son's life. Then Emily tried something new. She sent me a message. No legal language. Just a personal note, bypassing my lawyer completely. It threw me off. It felt like she was trying to appeal to me directly, maybe hoping I'd change my mind. She started off friendly. Said something like, "I've been thinking about this a lot, and I realize it's been hard for you too." Then she wrote that she never meant to hurt me, and in her mind, she thought she was doing what was best. She also said Jake was still struggling with me being around, that he felt threatened by my involvement. I'll admit, part of me wondered if she was genuinely trying to make things right, but the rest of me knew better. She'd hidden my son from me for years. Let Jake be the father figure. Only came clean when it was convenient for her. So her apology? It felt like another tactic, not something sincere. Still, I kept reading. Then she got to the real point. She said she was open to me being part of our son's life, but only if I agreed to a few conditions. A few visits a year, and I'd have to keep the truth to myself, never tell him I was his real father. She said it was to keep the peace, to avoid confusion, to make things easier for everyone. Like she was doing me a favor, offering me a guest role in my own son's life. That was the last straw. Any hope I had that she was being sincere? Gone. A few visits a year? Stay silent about who I am? I wasn't going to accept that. I wasn't about to be a background character in my son's story. 6. If Emily thought for a second that I would just accept what she said, she didn't know me very well. I sent her a simple, no-nonsense message. If I'm paying child support, then I'm his dad. End of story. Take it or leave it. She didn't respond, and I assumed that would be the last word on the matter. But a few days later, just as I thought things were finally dying down, I got a call from Jake. It was the first time I'd heard his voice in years. And I won't lie, it stirred up a lot of anger. I took a deep breath and made myself listen. Jake started by saying he wanted to clear the air. Said he hoped we could handle this like adults. I didn't buy it, but I let him keep talking. He admitted the situation had been tough on him. Said he was struggling to come to terms with everything. Even added that he respected my decision to step up. But then came the catch. He said he was worried that my presence would confuse our son, that having two dads wasn't healthy for a young child. At first, he almost had me with his "let's be reasonable" tone. But the longer he talked, the more obvious it became. This wasn't about compromise. It was about control. He wanted things to stay as they were. Me on the outside, silent and invisible. I cut him off. If I'm paying, I said, then I'm going to be part of his life. I'm not here to make things easier for you or Emily. This wasn't about them. It was about my son. Jake tried to argue again, something about how I was ruining their family. But I didn't let him finish. I hung up, and I knew, in that moment, it was probably the last civil conversation we'd ever have. After that, everything went quiet for a while. But I knew the next steps were legal. It felt like the calm before the storm. I was focused, ready for the fight ahead. Because I wasn't going anywhere. I was determined to be a real father. Not just a name on paperwork. Not just a stranger showing up a few times a year. And through it all, Haley was by my side. She kept me grounded. She reminded me why I was doing this, even when I felt like I was banging my head against a wall. Every frustrating call, every tactic Emily and Jake threw at us. She was there, supporting me through all of it. One night, while we were talking about what the future might look like, Haley said something I'll never forget. Your son deserves to know the real you. And one day, he'll appreciate the fight you put in to be there. That was exactly what I needed to hear. This wasn't about revenge. It was about love. It was about showing my son that his real dad cared enough to stand up for him. So here I am, still fighting, still waiting for the legal process to unfold. I have no idea how long it'll take or what other roadblocks they'll throw at me. But I'm not backing down. One day, my son will know the truth. He'll know that I did everything I could to be there. It's been a long, painful journey, but he's worth it. After months of court dates, arguments, and more stress than I can count, we finally reached a settlement. I was granted regular visitation rights. I finally had set times to see my son. No more hoops to jump through. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it was a start. The first visit? Absolutely overwhelming. I remember standing outside the park where we agreed to meet, heart racing. It felt like I was meeting him for the first time. And in a way, I was. When he ran up to me, everything clicked into place. I saw myself in him. Those curious eyes. That boundless energy. I couldn't stop smiling. We played. We laughed. He showed me what he loved, just like any other kid. For that short time, I felt like I was really part of his life. Like I was his dad. It wasn't perfect, though. I still have to deal with Emily and Jake. Still have to navigate the lines they drew. And sometimes I leave feeling like I don't know him as well as I want to. But visit after visit, something is shifting. He's opening up to me a little more. I'm not a stranger anymore. I'm his dad. And I think he knows it, even if he doesn't fully understand it yet. Emily and Jake? They're still doing their thing. But I think they're starting to realize something. I'm not going anywhere. I'm a permanent part of my son's life, whether they like it or not. They might not be thrilled about it, but they're beginning to respect it. And for now, that's enough. Haley's been my rock through all of it. She's gotten to know my son too. And watching them together, it makes me even more certain she's the one. We're planning our wedding now. And while I'm not with my son full-time yet, I dream of the day he's there beside me. Maybe one day, he'll be my best man. It's not a fairy tale, but it's our reality. I'll never get those first 6 years back. But every visit, every smile, every time he calls me dad, even if he doesn't fully understand what that means yet, makes it worth it. And maybe, one day, when he's old enough, I'll tell him everything. Not to make him choose sides, but so he knows the truth. So he knows that from day one, I fought to be there. And I'll keep showing up for him for as long as he'll let me.